So we have been on our conditionals topic for most of the summer so far, and we have one left. So to quickly review our conditionals, let me just change how that happens. Okay, to quickly review some of what we've already done. So far we've talked about three types of conditionals. We've had zero, first, and second. So there's one more left, our fourth and final conditional. So first off, if everyone would just look up in your chat, scroll up to the first word wall activity. This will be a small review of our first and second. So just some fill in the blanks of different words that are missing. So if you scroll up, there is a word wall exercise. It says first and second conditionals. Just click there and take a few minutes to do this exercise and it will just be adding the words. So there will be some words missing in each sentence, and then just click on and add and drag. You'll have to drag and drop the words into the sentence.
The title is first and second conditionals, right?
Yep.
同学到那个 chat box，就是到 chat 聊天室那边往上滑到最上面有一个 first and second conditionals word wall，然后把它这个表格的题目现在填一填。有问题的。You have any
So this will
questions?
be a little warm-up exercise. And it should be a lot of just a little practice, get us in our conditional headspace, our conditional thoughts. So while the students are doing that, one more housekeeping note for the observers. Just another reminder that this Saturday also starts our four-part webinar series on working for the majors for the online companies in China. And also Preply, which is a not in China, but is a tutoring service. So if you've ever thought about working for any of those major online teaching companies, VIP Kid, Magic Ears, Bling ABC, or Preply, we are starting a four-part webinar series that will begin this Saturday, and that is at 10 a.m. Central Time, 11 Eastern on Saturday, and that will be the each Saturday in August will be a different part. So in that exercise, we will talk about a general overview, pros and cons, the hiring process for each, how you get booked and get students and classes, and just talk a little bit about the modes of teaching because each of them are slightly different in their teaching style that they employ. So join us if you've ever been interested in that. The link for that webinar will also be on the Observer schedule. So just check out that schedule that Luke prepares each week and access the links from there.
Yes, if you check out our observation schedule, you will be able to see more info about the webinar. Yeah, just check out the link I have, and you can click on it to know more about the webinar information.
Thanks, Luke. Okay, class. So I will give everyone just 2 or 3 more minutes to finish that exercise. All right, if you are still working on the word wall, just give me a quick hand raise if you are still working on that exercise.
还没有完成的举手举高。OK，Percy，、
Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. I'll
Joyce。
give you all just a couple of more minutes just to get through that exercise.
OK，
Okay. So let's go ahead and take a look. I'll share my screen. Let's take a look at how everyone did today. All right, let's do a quick refresh. And the winner this week. All right. So we've got Barry, Ray, and Percy were our top three today. Barry, Ray, and Percy. So each of you just missed two questions. And so there were 20 altogether. So good job with that. That one was a little more difficult, more questions, and the way that the words that you were putting into the blanks was a little bit more difficult. So um, definitely take a look at your results because it will show you which ones you got incorrect or wrong and right. So take a look at that after class and just see which ones you got wrong and see what those correct answers would have been. Okay, so let's move on now to our lesson today. So as I mentioned, we are going to start the third conditional, which is our last one, and then we will start using all of these conditionals for the next few weeks. So what have we learned so far? We started with the zero conditional, and the zero conditional was for facts or things that are always true. So an example sentence of that, we have the simple when water reaches 100 degrees Celsius, it boils. Very simple. It's always true. It is a fact. So that's our zero. First conditional, we went a little further and we said these are things that are possible, but maybe not always true, but they're at least possible. So, an example, we said, okay, when the water boils, I will add the pasta. Okay, so that's very likely that once the water boils, I might add something to the water. So, first conditional, something that is possible, but maybe hasn't happened yet, but it is possible. Then we moved on to our second from last week. Who can give me an example from of the second conditional? Any sentence that you would use in the second conditional. Who can give me an example from last week? Angel, how about you? Do you have an example maybe from last week? A second conditional sentence?
Mm, if I had if I had many money, I would go to Japan.
All right. So if I had a lot of money, if I had a lot of money, yeah. So if I had a lot of money, I would go to Japan. So again, this one is a little different than the first. So these are things that maybe are either impossible or they aren't likely to happen, at least right now. So we speak in the second conditional with things like our hopes, our dreams, things like winning the lottery or finding a buried treasure on the beach. These are things that maybe could happen, but are unlikely or impossible to happen. Okay, so today we're going to step that up one more notch. So first, let's look at a condition here. So let's think about the following scenario. All right, how about Percy? Could you read the first little paragraph before the quote?
Last month, Brian was in the hospital for an operation. Liz didn't know this, so she didn't go to see him. They met for lunch a few days ago, and Liz said,
Okay, so let's think about this situation. So Brian is in the hospital and Liz didn't know. And so since she didn't know that Brian was in the hospital, she didn't go see him. Okay, so Protina, how about you read the quote?
If I had known you were in the hospital, I would have gone to see you.
Okay, so let's think about that sentence in our scenario. So Liz said, if I had known you were in the hospital, so she's in the present right now, thinking about something that happened before. So if I had known you were in the hospital, I would have gone to see you. Okay, so did Liz visit Brian in the hospital? No. No, she didn't. She didn't go see him. So Liz did not visit him in the hospital. So why didn't she? Grace, why didn't Liz visit Brian in the hospital?
Because he didn't know he was in the hospital.
Exactly. So when we use this conditional, the third conditional, we are thinking about something that has happened in the past, and we think about the condition or the clause that would have happened if that were true. And so in this case, we're saying that if Liz had known Brian was in the hospital, she of course she would have gone to see him. They're friends. So if she had known, she would have done that. Okay, so let's think. We're thinking of things like, okay, let's say you have a test in school and you didn't get a good grade on the test. So you might say, if I had studied harder, I would have gotten a better grade on the test. So thinking back to the past, what would you have done? And then what would have been the result? So had you studied more, you would have gotten a better grade. Okay. So we use the third conditional to express unreal or hypothetical situations and their results if true. So a hypothetical situation, a hypothetical is a situation that hasn't happened or did not happen, but we can think about it. We can think about what would have happened if it had taken place. So it's hypothetical. It hasn't happened and did, or maybe it didn't happen, but we can think about it as if it did. So let's look at our picture here. All right. So look, here's our friend, and it says in the past. So before, he didn't have money and he was unhappy. So this was what was true. This is what was true in the past, that he didn't have money and he was unhappy. So if we use the third conditional, we could talk about what would have happened if he did have money. So here he says, if I had had money, I would have been happy. So here we see he's not happy because he has no money. But if he did have money, he would have been happy. So we use the third conditional when we're talking now in the present but we're talking about things that happened before. Okay. So here's our structure, which we won't spend a lot of time here, but we're going to have two important things, an if and a had. So if I had, if you had, if they had, we're always going to have a had with our if. And then the second part of the sentence will always have a would have. So we're going to use have and had on those. So if she had, she would have. So those are the important parts of building a third conditional sentence. So let's look at some examples. How about Ray? Can you read our first example?
I didn't know you were in the hospital.
Okay, now let's try to make a third conditional sentence using the had and then would have. And those words in parentheses, the subject and verb in the parentheses. Can you try that, Ray? So you didn't know that someone was in the hospital. If
If uh, if I had known,
yeah.
I would come to see you.
Yes, okay, very close. So if I had known past tense because we're speaking about something that happened in the past. So if I had known you were in the hospital, I would have gone to see you. I would have gone to see you. So again, we had the if I had, and then the past tense, known. All right. Then we're going to say, I would have gone to see you. Okay. Let's try another sentence. How about Barry? Give this sentence a try.
Mm, if I uh, if I were hungry, I I have eat something.
Okay. So close again. So for our be this time, we're going to say if I had been hungry. So we're using a different, so not just the was or were for be, but we're using the a perfect continuous tense there. So a little bit of a different tense, because we're using the past perfect there. So I would have, if I had been hungry, I would have eaten something. So if I had known, I would have gone. If I had been, I would have eaten. All right. And so this last one, John got to the station bus in time to catch his bus. So John got to the bus station in time to catch his bus. If, so we're saying that he missed the bus. So if he had missed his bus or missed the bus, he would have been late for his interview. He would have been late for his interview. So thinking about what would have happened if he missed his bus. If he missed his bus, if he had missed his bus, he would have been late for his interview. Okay. So now, let's try to build some, and let's work together to build some examples here. So just a quick note is that we don't use would or wouldn't in the if part of the sentence. So notice that whenever we say, if you hadn't been late, there is no would. The would only happens in the other part of the sentence, in the clause. So we have the conditional part of the sentence, what is determined, what will happen, and then we have the if clause. So we never want to put the would in the if clause whenever we are building this tense. Only the would only goes in the next part of the sentence. We wouldn't have missed the train. So if you hadn't been late, we wouldn't have missed the train. All right, so let's do some practice. So our first one, I woke up late because I stayed up late. So what happened? You woke up late because you stayed up late. So let's think about what would have happened if you didn't stay up late. So let's make a third conditional. So in this case, we'll do this one together. I wouldn't have woken up late if I hadn't stayed up late. So this is a little bit reversed. We put the if second, like we can do sometimes. So I wouldn't have woken up late if I hadn't stayed up late. All right. Let's try another one. So he had an accident because he wasn't careful. All right. Eric, what do you think? How can you think of a way we could build a sentence to talk about what would have happened if he were careful? I'll start you off. Let's say if he had been careful,
If he had been careful, he he wouldn't have an accident.
yes, he wouldn't have had an accident. Good. So if he had been careful, he wouldn't have had an accident. So if he had been more careful, he wouldn't have had an accident. Yep. Okay. Let's look at this one. Bob didn't pass the test because he didn't study hard. Angel, what do you think? How can we make this a third conditional sentence? What would have
If
happened? Mhm.
mm, if he had studied hard, he would had passed the test.
Yes, he would have passed the test. He would have passed the test. Yeah, exactly. If he had studied hard, he would have passed the test. Hmm. In this case, it said he wouldn't have failed, but you could also say he would have passed or he would not. Yeah, so he would have passed the test. Okay, next, let's try this one. Sarah had cavities. So the cavities are when you eat too much sugar and candies and it makes little holes in your teeth. That's a cavity. So Sarah had cavities because she didn't brush her teeth frequently. So she didn't brush that much. Okay. So how about Joyce? What do you think?
If Sarah had brushed her teeth frequently, she wouldn't had she hadn't she would have hadn't had cavities cavities.
Okay, that was very close. So she wouldn't have had cavities. She wouldn't have had cavities. Yeah. So good job on the first half. If she had brushed her teeth more frequently, she wouldn't have cavities or she wouldn't have had cavities. Hmm. All right, good. All right, Sarah wouldn't have had cavities if she had brushed her teeth more frequently. So this sentence just gives you an example similar to some of our other conditionals. It gives you an example of how we can flip, how we can turn this and put our if part of the sentence second or last. Okay. All right, this one. Peter speaks Spanish because he took lessons. All right, Percy. What do you think?
If Peter hadn't took lessons, she, he wouldn't have spoken Spanish.
Yes. So now this one, we're just going to that was good. You were on the right track, but we're just going to change the way we say our verbs there. So if he had if he hadn't taken lessons, Peter speak wouldn't have spoke Spanish. So he wouldn't have spoke Spanish. So if he hadn't taken lessons, he wouldn't have spoken Spanish. So just slightly different on our verbs from just turning that to taken lessons if he hadn't taken lessons. All right. So he wouldn't have learned Spanish if he hadn't taken lessons. So again, he wouldn't have spoken Spanish. He wouldn't have learned Spanish. That is another way we could say that sentence. But you all are on the right track. This one is the hardest one. It just takes a little bit of some changing, but you all are on the right track. Okay. Brianna bought a fancy car because she saved money. All right. Protina, what do you think?
If Brianna hadn't saved money, she wouldn't have uh, bought a fancy car.
Yes, very good. If she hadn't saved the money, she wouldn't have bought a fancy car. That was great. Good job. Hadn't saved money, she couldn't have bought a fancy car. So couldn't, wouldn't. Yeah, couldn't have bought a fancy car. Good job. All right. Mark and his son went fishing because it didn't rain. All right, Eric, what do you think?
If he wouldn't rain, he he would went fishing.
Okay, almost. So we're thinking here this time it didn't rain, so they went fishing. So the opposite would be if it did rain, they would not have gone fishing. So we could say if it had rained, Mark and his son wouldn't have gone fishing. Okay? So if it had rained, Mark and his son wouldn't have gone fishing. Okay. All right. Ron was arrested because he was caught stealing. Hmm. All right, Ray, what do you think? Ron was arrested because he was caught stealing.
Hmm. Uh, if hmm, if Ron hadn't if Ron hadn't caught stealing, hmm, he he wouldn't uh, have been arrested.
Okay, good job on the second half. And you were very close on the first half of the sentence. So if he hadn't been, so since we have to use that different form of was, so if he hadn't been caught stealing, Ron wouldn't have been arrested. Okay. If he hadn't been caught stealing. Yep. All right. Fred put on weight because he ate too much. Let's see. How about Joyce? Fred put on weight because he ate too much.
If Fred had not eaten too much, he wouldn't have put on weight.
Yes, he wouldn't have put on weight. That was great. Good job, Joyce. Very good. All right, so that was our last one today. All right. So now that we've had a little practice and some examples using that conditional, if everyone would go to the chat, there is a worksheet in the chat, and it is called Third Conditional Worksheet. It is attached if you scroll up in the chat. So for this, it's going to give you examples similar to what we just said in our exercises. So it will give you examples such as Sam didn't get up early. He was late for work. So we know the two things. We know what happened. He didn't get up early and he was late for work. So then you have to form the conditional sentence. If Sam hadn't gotten up early, he wouldn't have been late for work. So if he had if he had gotten up early, he wouldn't have been late for work. Okay. So it's the same exercise that we were doing in the PowerPoint presentation, but now just some different scenarios. So I want everyone to try to do that and just type your answers on a blank document, or you can write your answers if you want to write them. I know it's a PDF, so you might not be able to type on the worksheet. But I will give you about a little over 10 minutes, and we'll just go over a few answers at the very end of class, and we'll start with this worksheet next class as well. So we'll just go over a few answers today. So work your hardest to get through, and then we'll wrap it up. Okay? And for the observers in the class, I just posted some information about the webinar um, into the chat. So just check that out if you can look at the different topics for each part. It's definitely not something that you, if there is one part that you are really curious about more than other parts, don't feel like you have to attend all parts to get something out of it. It's logically kind of laid out just where we kind of do an overview and then we do a deeper dive into some topics. And then the last part is the hiring process. So it's just arranged that way. But if you're maybe you already know a lot about the companies and you just want to get some more information on the classroom or maybe just on the hiring process, feel free to join one, multiple, or all. So. Yes, Amy, definitely. I see that you've thought about it for teaching or tutoring, in addition to your full-time job, and definitely a lot of people do that, and we will definitely talk about that in our webinar, just about the process for scheduling, what types of hours are available, and how that works. So that'll definitely be something that we'll discuss as part of the webinar. Okay, so I know that some of you are still working on the worksheet, and that is totally fine. We're going to start at the top and work our way down to hear some of your responses. And so I know that it may not be all the way complete, but let's see where we get. So let's start. How about we start with Joyce with number 2? So we didn't have our umbrellas. We got wet. What do you think?
Uh, if we had brought our umbrella, we wouldn't have gotten wet.
Yes, if we had brought our umbrellas, we wouldn't have gotten wet. Perfect. Good job, Joyce. All right, Angel. What about number 3? Jake didn't study. He failed the test.
If Jake had studied, he wouldn't have failed the test.
Yes, great. Yes, if Jake had studied, he wouldn't have failed the test. Great. All right, Grace. How about number 4? I rode the bicycle. I fell off.
If I hadn't rode the bicycle, I wouldn't fall off.
hmm I wouldn't have fallen off. Okay, and if I hadn't ridden the bicycle, if I hadn't ridden the bicycle, I wouldn't have fallen off. Yeah, I wouldn't have fallen off. Okay, good. Now, number 5. How about Ray?
Uh, if if I hadn't met him yesterday, I wouldn't have known his name.
Yes, perfect. And in good use of the known, I wouldn't have known his name. Good job. All right, Barry, number 6. the TV was broken, they were bored.
If the TV hadn't been broken, they wouldn't be bored.
They wouldn't have been bored. They wouldn't have
They
been bored.
wouldn't have been bored.
Good. So if the TV hadn't been broken, they wouldn't have been bored. Good. All right. Percy, number 7. Isaac sat under a tree. An apple fell on his head.
If Isaac hadn't sitting under a tree, the apple wouldn't have fallen on his head.
Okay, good job. So good job on the second half. This one, we do just use sat. So if Isaac hadn't sat under the tree, an apple wouldn't have fallen on his head. All right. Number 8. All right, number 8, Eric. Kevin got lost. He cried.
If Kevin hadn't gotten lost, he wouldn't cry.
He wouldn't have cried. He wouldn't have cried. But good. If Kevin wouldn't have gotten lost. Great job with that part, Eric. Great job. All right, Protina, number 9. Jenny practiced a lot. She won the contest.
If Jenny hadn't practiced a lot, she wouldn't have won the contest.
Yes. Very good. She wouldn't have won the contest. Perfect. Okay. And back to the top, Joyce. Number 10, the firemen arrived. They put out the fire.
If the firemen had wouldn't had arrived, and they wouldn't had put out the fire.
Okay, good. Second part was good. First part, we can just say if the firemen hadn't arrived. We don't have to put the would in the first part with the if. So we don't have to use a would with our if. In the part of the sentence that has the if or the if clause, we don't have to add a would or wouldn't. So we can just say if the firemen hadn't arrived, they wouldn't have put out the fire. Okay. Number 11, Angel. That was a funny joke. I laughed.
I would have been laughed if the joke had been funny.
Oh, almost. Okay. Now, you could say that, and we don't have to change the sentence to the opposite, but if we're going to keep it the same, then we would still say, if I had laughed, the joke would have been funny. So we could say something like basically, if you laugh, then it's a funny joke, is what you're saying. But if we change the sentence like our others, where we kind of say the opposite was true, then we would say, I, or if it would have been a funny joke, I would have laughed. So we're saying that if the joke would have been funny, I would have laughed. All right. And so that only leaves number 12. I know we're at the end of class, but Barry, give me number 12. We didn't clean the room. It was messy.
If we had cleaned the room, it wouldn't have been messy.
Yes, we ended on a great note. That was correct, Barry. Perfect. on that last sentence. So good job, everyone. I know that of our conditionals, the third is the hardest. And so make sure to check out Google Classroom. I will be uploading a homework assignment for practice. And next week, we'll move on to having some more conversations and really using these conditionals a little more. All right?
Okay, we will see you next week. Please unmute your microphone. Okay, let's say it.
Thank you, Teacher
Thank you,
Quentin.
Thank
teacher.
you, Teacher Quentin.
All right. I will see you next week. Bye, class.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.